In this video, we're going to learn timing events. So what do we mean by timing events? Imagine that we would like to run a piece of code over and over at specified time intervals. So for example, we can have a counter that will increase by 1 every second. Okay, so this is a timing event. Also, there is another example. We could have a piece of code that runs after a certain delay once the page is loaded. So let's say you load the page and after 3 seconds, you get an alert message. So this is also a timing event. Let's start with the first example. So now we would like to create a counter. Okay, so the counter is going to start at 0 and every second it's going to go up by 1. So first of all, we're going to need a variable x that we will initiate to 0, all right? And now we would like x to go up by 1 every second, and also we want to show x in our web page. So we're going to need to use the getElementsById and change the contents of an HTML element to the value of x. So let's have a paragraph. Let's use this one and change the ID of the paragraph to counter. Okay, and we would like the initial value of the paragraph to be 0. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to define another variable just before x. So this variable is going to get the elements by ID of counter. So we're just going to use variable counter and we will set it to the paragraph of ID counter. Okay, all right, so now we need to use another function that will create this timing event. So first of all, we will need to define another variable before we use that function. So this variable is going to be myCounter, and we will set that variable to SeTimeout, okay? And this function needs a couple of parameters. So the first parameter is going to be a function with the piece of code that we would like to run every second. Okay, so in our case it's going to be function, and then we're going to say here, so x increases by 1, and also we're going to change the inner HTML of this element. So counter inner HTML, we set it to the value of x. All right. Okay. So the second parameter is going to be the time interval in milliseconds. So in our case, we would like x to go up by 1 every second. So we're talking here 1000 milliseconds. Okay. So again, the function to use is setInterval. It will take a couple of parameters. First parameter is a function. Okay. Make sure that use a function and not just a piece of code, because the piece of code is just going to be in the curly brackets. This is a definition of a function, and the second parameter is the time interval in milliseconds. And we'll see later why we're using a variable, okay, when we would like to stop the code at some point. Okay, so let's run the page. Let's load the page. And now we can see that the counter is working. It goes up by 1 every second. Okay. So now let's say that we would like to stop the counter by clicking on a button. So let's create a button. Okay, so the button is supposed to stop the counting. So we put some text there, stop counting. Okay, so we're gonna need an on-click property, and the code to run here is gonna use the variable that we set here, which is myCounter, and we're gonna use that variable as a parameter for another function that will stop the counting. So this function is gonna be clear interval, okay, and the parameter is going to be the same variable that we used to set the interval and create the timing event. Okay, so let's try that. So now we can see that the counter is working, and now if you click on stop counting, it just stopped. Okay, so set interval is used to create the timing event, and clear interval is used to stop the timing event. Okay. Okay. Now let's jump to another example. So we'd like now to be able to load the page and run a piece of code after 3 seconds once the page is loaded. So in this case, we're gonna create another variable, and we're gonna call it delayed welcome message, because we are going to have an alert message 3 seconds after the page is loaded. So we're just going to call this variable delayed welcome message, and the function to use here is going to be SeTimeout. Okay, and also this function needs a couple of parameters. The first one is a function, and the second one is the duration that we're going to be waiting for before the code is executed. So the function is going to be running the alert message. Okay. So for example, welcome to our page. Okay, and the second parameter is going to be the delay. In our case, we want to wait for 3 seconds, which is 300 milliseconds, 3000 milliseconds. So let's try this. So we can see that the alert message shows up 3 seconds after the page loads. So if we click on OK, then the other timing events will just carry on. All right. Okay, now let's see how to avoid getting this alert message. So there is a way to stop the message from showing up. We can do that before the message shows up. So let's create another button. Okay. So basically, if we click on this button before 3 seconds from the loading of the page, then we're going to stop this event from happening. Okay, so let's have some text in the button. So avoid welcome message. Okay, and we're going to need an on-click property. And this time we're going to use another function. It's called clear timeout. Clear timeout. And the parameter, you can guess, is going to be the same variable that we use for the SeTimeout function. So, okay, we're just going to put the parameter there. Okay, and now let's try it. Let's add the line break here. Okay, so let's try. So now we can see that the counter is working. We get the alert message 3 seconds after the page loads. But now if we refresh the page and we click on the avoid welcome message, now the alert message doesn't show up. Okay, but we need to make sure that we do that before the 3 seconds elapse. Okay.